off their phone, but I unmute. First off, welcome. I really appreciate it. I love that y'all came to support our presenters. We tried to find topics that are super relevant, topics that people have struggled with, and I think you're gonna like what you see. Kicking this off here, we have Torie Wiggins. Torie received her Intimacy Director training from Theater Intimacy Education and Intimacy Coordinators of Color, and Intimacy Directors and Coordinators, and is a certified intimacy captain. She has served as intimacy director for various theaters, including Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, No Theater Cincinnati, and Cincinnati Shakespeare Company. And we're going to kick this off, Torie.
Yeah.
All ready? All right.
I hope you don't feel the same way about reading off of iPads as you do phones. Hopefully it's a little less egregious. Just a cheat sheet for me. I don't want to sit on the set, so just saying.
Would you like a chair?
I love a chair, actually.
Please.
I didn't know. But anyway, I'm Torie Wiggins, local multi-hyphenate artist. I won't run down all of the things that take me away from home. But I became really passionate about intimacy direction when I was teaching theater at Miami University and Xavier University. Also, I taught at CCM as well. And working with the students, having to do these very adult plays with these adult themes and not having ways to navigate intimacy for them kind of made me start to, I didn't know that was you.
Glasses.
Okay. Kind of made me start to seek out ways to really help them become a little freer. One of the big, thank you so much. Now we can have a conversation. One of the big myths about intimacy direction and coordination is that it's restrictive. And I just want to debunk that right now. It is the complete opposite. When you bring intimacy choreography and intimacy direction into the room, it really allows for the actors to create clear boundaries. And once those boundaries are set, they can freely work within them. So it really gives people this kind of safety net to say, I can try these things, I can make these choices knowing that I'm not stepping over people's boundaries. So I just wanted to start off with that because I think a lot of really like methody actors are like, oh, I can't be, free to be organic, and that is just not true. I have found that it actually helps us to explore a little bit better because people know that they're in a safe space and so they're comfortable kind of trying things. Basically, and just so you know, intimacy director and intimacy coordinator. One is for stage and one is for film. So intimacy coordinators work for television and film. Intimacy directors work in theater spaces. Just because people use them interchangeably, we want to go ahead and debunk that. We are in the room to help honor the actors' needs for bodily autonomy and boundaries. We advocate for the actors. We are a liaison between the actors and the production crew, including the stage manager and the director. A lot of times, my role comes into play when there is no physical intimacy. Sometimes it is mental intimacy, it's hard topics, it's things that make people feel triggered or uncomfortable or unsafe, even when there is no touch involved. So I will come in and liaison between the actor and the director and communicate with the stage manager on how to create a safe space so that people can feel comfortable making big, bold choices, as we like to do in acting. The main role is to obviously honor the story. That's where we start. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The director's vision and the actor's bodily autonomy. Those are my three main goals when I walk into a room. What's the story? What does the director want? What does the actor need? And those are, that's just kind of where I start. We operate from a place of informed consent always. Again, we stage stories of sex. We also work with stories of disability, age, appropriate cultural context, and competency. So again, I will come into a room if, let's say, we're doing a story about war, Holocaust, slavery, things like that. Sometimes I'll often come in and just make sure that I can have an open and honest conversation with the actors if the director wants me to. Sometimes it's 1 day, sometimes it's 4 days, and that's all they need. Again, advocacy is a big thing. If an actor doesn't feel comfortable telling the director they don't want to do something that's in the script, that is where I come in. A lot of times now, audition announcements and like casting notices will say there is some intimacy involved in this show so that you know when you audition what you're getting into. That's kind of becoming common practice, which is, I think, super smart. Yeah, we are responsible for the bodily autonomy and emotional safety of the actors. We make the space a space of consent. The big C word, consent is huge. Here's what consent is not. Consent is not, can I touch you? Can I touch you? Can I touch you? Do you mind if I grab your hand? Do you mind if I touch your shoulder? Do you mind if I walk by you? Do you mind if I brush your shoulder? That is not what consent is. And I make sure that the room doesn't feel like that because nobody wants to work that way, especially when you're working with people, as we often are in theater, that we know, people that we're comfortable with, right? We want people to feel free to do the work and to explore. That's what the rehearsal room is for. So we make it a space of consent. We put the boundaries out front, and boundaries don't mean, don't touch me here, don't touch me here, don't touch me here, don't touch me. That's not what boundaries are. Boundaries can also be, hey, I experienced a shoulder injury playing softball yesterday, so can my shoulder be off limits today? That's a boundary. It's not always about sexual connotation, right? One of the things I tell my students, and I also like to tell my actors, because as actors, we want and need to be free to make choices. Would you all agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So a big thing that I like to bring into the room is the difference between feeling uncomfortable and feeling unsafe. And the difference between those two things is boundaries. Feeling uncomfortable, get over it, you're an actor. This is what we do, right? I tell my students all the time, push past your discomfort or at least talk about why you're feeling it. If you feel unsafe, that is where we have to have a conversation about boundaries and consent, right? So again, the work is not meant to be restricted. It's not meant to be, I don't really want to talk about this, and then it's like, okay, then we don't do the scene. That's not what we're doing here, right? We know as actors, we push past our discomfort, or we at least think about why that is, right? We didn't get into this business to be shy, that's for sure. But once we honor boundaries, it's less likely that boundaries are broken, because once boundaries are broken, the space will no longer feel safe. And then actors won't feel like they can do the things they want to do. And this isn't just for dramas, this is for comedy as well. There's intimacy and noise is off, you know? Any time that you've got people kind of touching intimately, sexually, hugging, you want to make sure that that space feels safe. So the way I work with intimacy in a room, well, first I'll read the script, OBS, and kind of identify moments that I think need to be talked about. Once the actor knows that I know what we're looking out for, they can then say, well, can we also take a look at this? There's a handhold here, can you just look at it? Sometimes I look at it and they don't need me here, and knowing that that care is in the room, we can push past it, move on, and that ends up being what it is, right? I like to have meetings with the director to make sure that I understand their vision. Sometimes directors want to cut intimacy that's in the play. Sometimes they want to add it, right? Which we want to give them room to. If that's the story they want to tell, just have to do it safely, right? I work in something called Pillars of Safe Intimacy, also known as the 5 C's, okay? The first C is context. The second one is communication. Also, if you don't want to take these notes, I have a wonderful PowerPoint that I'm happy to send to your DM, and I'll share that with you. Please, yeah, it's a slide. Please don't feel like you have to write everything I say. It's a beautifully done PowerPoint. I'm pretty proud of it. I'm playing around with Canva. I'm very proud of it. So if I had an AD, I'd put it up. So the first C is context, the second one is communication, the third one is consent, the fourth one is choreography, and the fifth one is closure. Just to make it easy, 5 C's. The first C, context, is where we start. What is the story? Why is the intimacy necessary, right? How does it further along the story? If we're just doing it because it's a cool thing to do, no one's gonna feel good about doing that. There has to be a reason for the intimacy in the scene. Do the dynamics of the scene create truth and authenticity in the story? And in order for that to happen, does it need a kiss, a hug, a neck nuzzle, whatever we're doing, right? And sometimes the answer is yes. And in that case, we hope to craft that. The C, and I'll go a little bit deeper into these too. I just want to get these C's in your head so you're like, 5 C's. The second C is communication. And one thing we say in intimacy direction is you always make the implicit explicit. Always make the implicit explicit. There must be open communication at all times between the director, the intimacy director, the stage manager, the actors. And I won't get deep into this today, but this includes avenues of reporting, which there is a protocol for. So stage managers know how to record or write down intimacy choreography. You can name an intimacy captain the same way you would name a fight captain, or a dance captain, right? So you would have someone there to do that, checking in with the actors, especially if it's like a really heavy intimacy scene. We do intimacy calls the same way we would do a fight call, right? We want to make sure everybody's doing the same thing all the time so it doesn't get weird. Because one way to make it weird is to go a week without doing it and to come back and do it again in real time. So we want to keep that communication line open. The third C is consent. This is the biggie. This is the big C. Knowing the difference between permission and consent, right? A lot of times there are authoritative hierarchies in theater, right? The director decides everything in the room. And when the director's not there, the stage manager decides everything in the room. Only the actors participating in the intimacy can give consent. A director can't say, I'm telling you it's okay to kiss her. That can't happen. That autonomy belongs to the actor experiencing the intimacy. The person directly affected can only give it. And we'll talk more about that later. The consent will always lie within the context as well, right? You don't want to start asking for permission to do things that have nothing to do with what's in the play, because why? Then we get down to the actual choreography. A lot of intimacy directors use different ways of choreographing intimacy. I like to start very basic. I like to use numbers. On a scale of 1 to 5, how intense is the passion in this scene, right? How long does this kiss need to last to tell the story? Is it a 1, honey, I'm home, how was your day? Or is it like a 5, where we're passionately kissing and we kind of can tell what the next step would be? So sometimes numbers just help people just kind of codify what's happening without having to use a bunch of loaded words, like, you know, sexual or passionate, or I want to go at them, or whatever. We like to keep those loaded words out of the room, so I like to work in just scales, because I think it's easier. I think all scenes, just like fights, of intimacy should be choreographed. I typically will only choreograph choreographs, lip to lip or lip to skin contact. Handholds, hugs, those things can just be consent-based practices, right? As long as we've set a boundary and no one has said that anywhere a hug would take place is out of bounds, you just tell the actors to make sure they're making eye contact, and just being there helps them to do it and feel safely doing it. So it's not like we're like, and grab his hand on 1, 2, 3, and squeeze. It's not that. So we won't ruin a soft and tender moment, right? We just want to make sure that there's consent in the room. In intimacy, there should never be any surprises. There is no such thing as I felt this last night and that's why I did it. Absolutely not. It is still a play. You are not living in your own rom-com. We are following a script. Period. For the duration of the run, it's gotta be the same. And then finally, the fifth C is closure. The same way you would clock out at the end of your workday, you gotta leave all the intimacy stuff in the theater. Don't take it home, no showmances. Unless you come in married, which in Cincinnati, a lot of things. They're just already there. In which case, it's like, do what you want when you leave the grounds. But there are ways, especially for the heavier, if you're doing a play that has to do with like assault or some like heavy themes, you want to just tap out, clock out, step out, whatever you need to do, shake it off like Taylor Swift. Whatever you got to do to leave it in the theater, you leave it in the theater, and that keeps it job related and not like seeping into things that'll make you want to do things differently when you do it. Right? Great. Any questions so far? I am speed talking, and I probably shouldn't be. I have a lot of.
I got one for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned in your intro when you talked about how a lot of times you have to tap into culture.
Yes.
So I'm interested in, as you as an intimacy coordinator, are there times where you might read through a script and you would understand the culture of this time was this, where you might not see some things happen?
Absolutely.
Do you go in sometimes and find maybe a director has got a slightly different vision, and then you have a discussion about that?
Absolutely. That's happened a couple of times. I can particularly remember two. There's a play called The Chinese Lady, where there were some cultural things that wouldn't happen that we here in America would do things differently. And that the director was lovely, and we just had a conversation about it. Plays about like anything antebellum slavery is always a hot button. It's just, we gotta talk about the elephant in the room. Holocaust, these things are hard for people to talk about. And I think one of the biggest myths is that acting means you have no real feelings or connections to what's happening here. And that is just not true. And sometimes all that is allowing a space in rehearsal at the table to just talk about it. It doesn't even need a thing put in place. Once people can kind of feel that they can have a discussion when things come up, you get it out and you know that we're all on the same page. Or if we're not, we do what we can to get there. And it just gets it out of the way and allows us to get into the work. So sometimes, yeah, coming in as an intimacy director, it is just sitting at the table and being like, I'm giving you permission to talk about these things right now. And you don't have to come in and pretend like they don't affect you. Absolutely. It's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, just tagging on the thing about the cultural thing, I found a couple of times when I've been working on a play that is about a culture that I'm not a part of, to bring in someone, okay, just talk to us. Even something as simple as when I directed South Pacific with high school kids, I brought my grandmother in, who worked in a war factory and whose husband fought in the South Pacific, to talk about the things that they knew. And some of it too is the person who has that experience, who has that knowledge, can say to you, hey, this is important. And it's maybe a line or a blocking that you didn't even realize was significant in a way, and they can point that out for you so that A, you don't stumble into something stupid, and B, can take advantage of that important moment that you maybe didn't know about.
Yes, and when you have questions about those things, that's the time to do it.
Like, what the heck is this? Why are these words here?
I work closely, I do a little bit of dramaturgy myself, but I work closely with dramaturgs. If dramaturgs are on the project or anybody who's doing the research, it doesn't have to be like that person. Sometimes I'm the one who has to come in with the research because they don't have a dramaturg. I happily do that because they're all very connected, right? Knowing about the culture coming in, I can answer these questions of why wouldn't I grab him and shake his hand, And it can be something as simple as that. Like in the cultural context of this play, they wouldn't slap each other on the back or something like that. So just knowing those things can really help the context of the whole play. Absolutely. So yeah, that's why it's important to know the context, right? Understand the story within the intimacy. Understand why touch is needed. Understand why the intimacy is there. Establish the playwright's vision, establish the director's vision, because the goal is to create truth and authenticity. Even in a farce, even in a musical, in that world, it's got to be true for however many hours you're on stage, and then we can all talk about it afterwards. But in them, it's why Harry Potter works, right? For those 2 hours, we believe this little boy can fly on this broom and all of his friends are magical and people can create spells. If you're sitting there the whole time going, I don't buy this shit, it doesn't work. Nobody would pay for it, right? So we want to make it true, and making sure that authenticity is there in the intimacy is a big, big part of that. I want to talk a little bit about something called FRIES, like French fries. It's an acronym. Consent is a biggie because yes is meaningless without space for no. Yes is meaningless without space for no. Sometimes actors feel like they're not a good actor if they push back or if they say no, right? We're all familiar with well, what role are you interested in? I'll play anything. I'll do anything, right? Because you just want to be a part of it. Yes is meaningless without space for no. You gotta have boundaries. And if you have none, you gotta mean that so that we can play in that exploratory space we call rehearsal. No is not an indictment. It is okay to say, no, you can't touch me here. And you never have to give a reason. You never have to justify that. My name tag went bye-bye. It's okay. It's on the floor. I'll grab that. It's very important for me to kind of harp on this, especially because I work a lot with younger people. They need to understand that saying no doesn't mean they won't be able to work with you again. Saying no doesn't mean that they're difficult to work with, right? One of the big components of intimacy direction is there is always an exit. There is always an exit. If you've got a kissing scene and you've got somebody who doesn't want to kiss, but that's the actor you hired, we got to find a way around that. Just got to do it. Will it be the story you wanted? Maybe not. Can it still be true? Absolutely. When I provide intimacy direction, I offer an A, a B, and a C version of every piece of choreography. A is the ideal. This is the one we want. This is the one we craft in the room. B happens when, let's say there's a kiss there, and for whatever reason, that kiss can't happen tonight. It could be someone comes in with a personal trauma or trigger. It could be a cold sore. It could be COVID scare. I mean, we don't know anymore, right? It doesn't always have to do with somebody just feeling things. Sometimes it just can't happen today, right? So you got your B version. C version, no contact at all. And sometimes that means getting rid of the scene. And sometimes that means doing something that may tell a little bit of a different story, but that has to be true for that night. You gotta offer that. It cannot be all or nothing with intimacy, or you'll lose the trust of not only your actors, but your audiences. Whatever it is that night, it's gotta be true. That's it. Actors should always have the agency to remove consent at any time. This is why it's important for intimacy captains and stage managers to check in every rehearsal and every night to make sure boundaries didn't change, because guess what? They can. They absolutely can. Again, I can come in one day and have full agency over my body, have a softball injury that night, and when I come in the next day, you can't touch this arm, sorry. Right? We gotta work around that. So, with consent, you wanna remember FRIES, F-R-I-E-S, FRIES. These are the rules of consent. F, consent must be freely given without influence or coercion. You don't mind touching her here, right? That's not the same thing as may I touch you here, right? It's not the same. So you want to make sure that there's no influence or coercion, that people are giving their consent freely. That's the F. R, reversible. Again, consent can be withdrawn at any time for any reason. One thing we know about live theater, you've got to be ready to pivot. This is just one more example of that, because things happen. Yeah. The I in FRIES is informed. So you want to make sure that the context and situation has been made explicit, right? We're not implying anything. When we talk about intimacy, we need to know exactly why this couple is kissing at this time. can't be because, well, you know why. Well, come on, I mean, there, come on, don't you get it? It's that thing, You gotta talk about, at this moment in their relationship, this is pivotal because, this is happening because. You always wanna give context to that. So make sure that the actors and the director and the playwright and the intimacy director and the stage manager are informed. And sometimes these people are the same person. I've definitely been the director and the intimacy director. I don't recommend it, but you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes, right? That's okay, as long as the room feels safe and everybody understands it. The E is enthusiastic. That means that not only are you giving consent, you're giving consent enthusiastically. That does not mean that if somebody says, can I kiss you? Yeah! Right? It's not that. Give me those lips. No. Enthusiastically just means that you are sure that this person is giving it without any reservation. In intimacy direction, we call this present versus presence. You want to make sure that they are present and with you and looking you in the eye and saying, yes, you can touch me there, as opposed to, sure, yeah, that's fine. Right? That's a red flag. And a good intimacy director will pick up on that enthusiasm is not there. So that's the E. I have to explain this to my students. They see enthusiastic and they're just like, I'd love to hug you. So that means. And the S is specific. So you want the context fully disclosed with all the information. You don't want to decide what the intimacy is when you get there. You want to have an idea. If it's not explicitly spelled out in the script, like let's say a director says, there's not a kiss here, but I would love a tender, passionate kiss to show that he is finally on board with this relationship after what just happened in the cafe, right? You want to make sure that the context of the intimacy is very specific and not, why not just have a kiss here? I mean, don't want that.
I have a question on
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Wait, what if there's a difference between the director and the actor's view of the context in a specific intimate moment?
Actor wins.
Okay.
The actor wins. Period. If it's the director's view and the actor acquiesces and says, okay, if that's what you want, you're not ever gonna get authenticity and truth in that moment because they don't feel safe. Yeah. It's a good question. Yeah.
You had said that you don't recommend being the director and the intimacy coach. Can you clarify and expand on that?
Yeah, it's really about a power dynamic. Sometimes in a room, as much as we try to say that it's collaborative, the director kind of runs the room. And when a director puts on an intimacy director hat, they have to make sure that their directorial vision, to your point, is not overstepping the bounds of an intimacy director saying, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to, even if that's what the director wants. It really just takes away that liaison, but that's all you got, Like, I would hate for you to not have intimacy direction present because you're the only one in the room who knows how to do it, and you're the director. So it has happened, but that would be the reason why I wouldn't have done it. Just, it's a kind of, everybody just gets to stay in their lane type of thing. I work on a sliding scale, by the way. Anybody needs any intimacy? I'm just right over the bridge. All my focus amounts of free time. Yeah, that's a great question. I can actually pause for any questions here.
Is there like a website or a way for, if you're going into directing, to find a list of intimacy coordinators in the area?
Yeah, in the US, yes. In Cincinnati or greater northern Kentucky, there may be 3 of us. But here's the thing, there is no real, it's kind of, intimacy directors are kind of like bartenders. You can get certified, but if you know what you're doing, you kind of don't have to be.
Okay.
If you learn it, you don't really need the paper to be able to do it. And they're really fighting about that with like SAG right now. It's a big thing because it's kind of gatekeepy right now. Because intimacy direction has been around longer than the certification has. So there are people who have trained and know it but don't have certification. It's also extremely costly. So now we put like classism in the mix, and so it's this big like fight. But as of right now, if you have the tools, and that's what you're doing. Like if you, let's say if I send you my slide deck, you read it, you take an online workshop or two. If you feel like you are comfortable staging intimacy for a play, I think you can offer that service. I mean, and maybe start small, maybe start with, a play where the stakes aren't super high and just kind of practice. That sounds terrible, but yeah. I mean, I think the more you do it, the more you learn about how it's done. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I think Greg has a question.
Oh, I'm gonna go
I've
here
got
and then I'll go back.
lots, so.
I'll go here, and then there. Yes.
Okay, you made the statement that if somebody was not into what they're gonna do, you want to try to change it. Okay, so what if you have a situation as a director and an actress who is playing husband and wife, and she makes the statement, I will not
These things at auditions. It's important to reiterate these things at first read. And let's just say, worst case scenario, for whatever reason, this woman comes and says, I know I took this role, I know I said I would, but I won't kiss anyone but my husband. This particular husband and wife don't kiss.
Okay.
You gotta make that moment work with a handhold, a hand kiss, a tender face touch, whatever she'll allow because you hired her now or you gave her the role. So, but that, I'm glad you said that, is why it's important to make the implicit explicit. There are 2 kissing scenes in this play before you walk into the audition. And please don't take it wrong. I think it's okay to say that this is one of the things that we would like to ask of the actor. Now, if this is the best person for the part and you're willing to work around it, you make it happen. I mean, I've definitely had to do C versions of things during the run of a play. Like, somebody got a cold sore and they couldn't kiss, and the other actor was like, I'd rather just not touch those things. It really can be very contagious. And so we had to have sweet looks. and it changed the story a little bit for that night, but somebody coming in who is none the wiser would probably just think that that's the version of the story they're seeing and gotta roll with it.
So it's changing the situation.
A little. Yeah. I'll go here and then
Yeah, so this is kind of a 2-part question.
Yes.
So when you are choreographing an intimate moment and the actors are going for A and we're like, yeah, let's do it, but then A suddenly doesn't work, like period. Not like just one night, but it's like, ooh, this is not working. How as an actor, can you find those cues or express that, hey, I need to go down to a B? And then also as a director, if you're watching and you're like, this is not working.
It's a great question. Yes. So when an intimacy director stages intimacy, you want to make sure before you leave that project, you have an A, a B, and a C version of the intimacy, right? Then your stage manager or your intimacy captain before every show will check in at your intimacy call, ideally, is A okay tonight? Yes, great. When I build intimacy, I can't speak for everyone, there is an eye lock that has to happen before the intimate moment, especially lip to lip, right? If you don't get that actor's eyes, it defaults to B, period. Even if you thought you didn't get them, default to B. Some intimacy directors like to do like cues. So like 2 taps on the arm means we're doing B. 1 tap means C or something like that. If you have an actor that's really kind of, to be completely honest, once you put all of these rules and boundaries in place, almost nothing ever changes. The only time I've ever had to change things is illness. Again, it is this theory that once you give everybody all of these options, they're gonna go with the best one, knowing that they have all the other ones. It's when you don't have a plan B that, stuff starts popping off. But that would be my thing. So you've got these kind of like checkpoints. When we're building it, A, B, C, you make sure A works, make sure B works, you make sure C works as best it can. Then each night before the run, the stage manager or the intimacy captain or both will check in with them. Is A still good? And they might come in that night going, hey, I gotta go B tonight. And then ahead of time. In the moment, in the play, if in that moment you're like, nope, not tonight, right? If you don't get that eye lock, it goes to B. And both actors know that. Or if you get a signal, right? If you get a 2 tap, you go to B. 3 tap, C. If you feel like you need those things in place, they are available to you. Yeah.
I wanted to know if something's wrong on like a show night and one of the characters literally says, kiss me in the script, what would you do?
Cut the line.
It's a part of a song.
And the kiss happens in the song?
Yeah.
What show is it?
Rent?
Ah, yes. When you're building that intimacy, you gotta have a contingency plan in place. If it's skipping measures, or if it's reacting in a way that makes that moment true. So if the actor says, kiss me, and the other actor just simply does this, we'll believe it, why they didn't, right? Without changing anything. There's always a way. It takes some, I've had to do some funky, sleight of hand turn and looks that make things different without changing lines. And again, these are worst case scenarios. It is not likely you're gonna have somebody who knows rent, right? Who comes in to do rent going, not tonight.
I just meant like if they're sick and it's a show night and they can't kiss.
You gotta have a contingency plan in place. Yeah, you got to. Because guess what we used to do back in the day? Do it anyway, and then everybody would say, yeah, because we thought we had to do it, right? That's a whole other conversation. Just not letting actors be ill. I've done a show with food poisoning. It's not fun. Buckets in the wings. Awful. It's awful. It's awful. We cannot go back to that. Yes.
My name's Amanda. I'm training with IDC right now.
Amazing. I know the folks at IDC.
I'm in that middle group where they're switching the whole.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard about the switch ever.
I did.
It's a little
It
crazy.
was Tanya, Alicia.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Alicia and I went to school together.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Right there?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
So we went.
I went to CC, but I know a lot of folks at IDC.
My question is for understudies.
Oh, yes, yes.
The intimacy coordination that I've currently done, I usually try to have the understudy come in like an hour before call if it's day of. Can you walk me through your sort of intimacy rehearsal with an understudy when one person is the original cast and then one person is new, and how does that differ, I guess?
Yes. The understudies get their own choreography. So if you're hiring an intimacy director or bringing in an intimacy director and you have understudies, they need their own session with the intimacy director. They get their own choreography. Their boundaries do not default to the original actors. So they get their own. And it's like one rehearsal, they write everything down, they get their own, right? If the understudy has to go on, they need to do an intimacy call with their intimacy choreography notes and the other actor. And you gotta do all the different, if you've got, this one's out, this one's in, this one's out, you gotta have separate choreography for all of them. If you can, which you gotta, it's just unfair. Even if they never use it, they need their own. I definitely do separate choreographies for the understudies.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes.
I have one regarding culturally, words that may be said in one culture that may be derogatory in another culture. Do you strike those, put in what you feel might be appropriate for your culture, or if it changes the meaning of the play, do you keep it if not everybody's happy with what you've decided as a director, or that kind of thing? How do you go about juggling that?
What's the context of the play? Like, what's the story? Is it necessary? Is it a part of the story, right? Perfect example, if you're doing To Kill a Mockingbird, you can't cut the N-word. It's a part of the story. It changes the story to say anything other than what would have been. I mean, it's the context of the story, right? Now, there have been times where if it's just kind of blah, if it's dated and somebody just says it because that was a word at the time, we have changed things. We've just taken it out. If it didn't change the story and didn't make the story no longer true, you can do that. You gotta just kind of use your best judgment and talk about it. You gotta talk to the room, see what the feel is. Yeah. We've like I've cut in a play where somebody goes, "You're retarded," and they mean it as like a derogatory term. We've changed that to stupid, and it didn't change anything because of the context of how it was used. But again, if you have To Kill a Mockingbird or something, you kind of just gotta talk about it.
Do you mean the general story or the story for the character? Because if this character would say, I can't even say the words that you just said.
I know. I shouldn't say that, but I'm using it as
I know.
Yeah.
But so if the character's story, their past reflects their story, do we change the word? Because we don't.
That is a case by case situation. I think you gotta look at the context, you gotta look at the character, at the end of the day, if the story is still true with the change it.
Okay.
If something differs or the context then becomes different, you gotta talk about it. You gotta because a lot of times it's just people feeling uncomfortable. And this is obviously not an acting class, but as we know, we can never judge our characters. So if your character is saying something mean, it's not you. It's your character who is a human being that is flawed. So you've got to be careful that it doesn't creep into that. We had a lot of fireside chats with the white people in the cast of To Kill a Mockingbird, with them apologizing on every 10-minute break for saying the N-word. And it's like, guess what? I understand. I read the book. I know what the story is. You don't have to apologize to me every time we break character, because I signed up for this story too. We are telling a story, right? But again, if you've got the R word and if it says stupid, it has the same impact and it doesn't change anything, then by all means, don't make the room cringy if you don't have to. But case by case.
As a group of actors, if you were uncomfortable with a change a director decided to make, can the actors basically explain to the director that they feel that it's changing the concept of the story or the meaning of the story or the character's background?
Ideally, yes. This is why it's good to have an intimacy director, because an intimacy director can be the liaison there. They can advocate for the actors at that moment. If there is a power dynamic or a relationship dynamic that doesn't allow for that. Because let's be honest, every director is not like, this is a collaboration. Tell me how you feel. That is just not the truth. Right? Some directors come into the room and you're just like, I better know my lines. And you may not be comfortable having that conversation, but if I'm hired to have these kinds of conversations, I will do that. And I can say the actors feel uncomfortable doing this, right? Whether or not you can go directly to the director, I think you would know that better than I. It just depends on the room. Depends on the room. Yeah. Yes.
I have a different question.
Yes.
So you talked earlier about turning it off, the intimacy of leaving it at the rehearsal space or stuff, and then going home. How do you do that? What are some tips to
yes.
that off?
You can do, so we have this thing that we borrow from Alba Emoting. If anybody's familiar with Alba, I know you probably learned it. There's this process called stepping out. There's a short version and a long version. And it just connects mental, physical, allows you to leave it. It's the same thing. If anybody studies like anxiety grounding, it's very similar to that, right? It's like you can't be angry if you're jumping up and down with your arms up. It's that kind of process. There's a short version, there's a long version. It can be as simple as going to the person that you've been yelling and kissing and just tapping out as yourself, right? When you tap in, you can be like, my name is Margaret, boom. When you tap out, my name is Torie, have a good night. It's as simple as that, right? So there are many ways that you can do that. Some people prefer to leave the space and do it. Some people prefer to do it on the stage. And that's just something you can talk to your director, your scene partner, your cast about the best way to do that. As long as you have something in place. Some people sit in their car for 5 minutes and listen to music. I mean, whatever works for you, but there are specific rituals in place to do that, which I can also share. I don't know who to send these resources to, but
You can send it to me.
I have some that I'm happy to share.
Have we disseminated questions before you finish presenting, or are we at the questions portion of the presentation?
You tell me. I think I'm way over my time.
I mean, well, we started a little late, that's fine. And if you have more to present, please.
I do. I'll also send this so I can breeze through this really quickly. I love to take the questions though, because this is still very new as far as like theater goes and practice. So happy to take questions. Just really quickly, we went over fries with consent. You'll probably recognize a lot of this from IGC. Choreography. A lot of times the choreography in the context of intimacy is to remove the pressure of perceived experience, right? So you never want to see, go ahead and kiss him, you know how to kiss him, or you know what to do when you're ready to do it. You don't want to do you don't want to assume. You don't want anybody to bring in their own perceived experience, because you're not allowing them to separate themselves from the character, and you're not allowing them to start from a ground zero for this story and this truth. So you definitely want to make sure that you choreograph it, even if you don't do it the way I do it with the numbers, which I'm just telling you really, really works. It's also recordable, right? You can say, hey, we set the duration of this kiss at 4 seconds, and the last 3 nights it's been 5. And that's just something that we come in and say, how do you both feel about this? Is this something that's happened organically, right? Is this something that you feel tells the story better? Is one of you doing it and the other one is just going along with it? This is where numbers help us. So you don't have to just say it looks like it's a little hot and heavy, You can actually have a base there. You can make changes to it. You can make changes to it during the run. I've had people call me after I've choreographed and said, hey, both actors decided that for this moment, they both just kind of want to make it the B version for the rest of the run. I said, how does the director feel about that? The director says, yeah, cool. Do they need me to come in and review the B version? No, they've got it. The stage manager wrote it down. Amazing. This is happening in email, right? Got that.
Can I have a quick question?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, please.
How you do it with technical? So like if the cue, so for the timing, like, oh, this kiss is supposed to go until the lights go out, but the lights aren't going out.
Yeah.
Or that person is supposed to come on and interrupt you while you're making out, and it's like, okay, I'm making out, now I'm.
That's exactly why I use numbers. It will say kiss to blackout in the script, and I'll be like, put it at a 5.
Nice, okay.
Because if the lights never go out, whoever is initiating that kiss, which we'll talk about in a minute with who owns the responsibility for keeping the count, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know it's been 5 seconds, I'm gonna pull away in character and not like, so that this is exactly why I like to set numbers no matter what. And if the lights go out at 3 and you set it at 5, guess what? Moment over. Who cares? It's done, right?
Cool.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And obviously the stage manager would need to be present to write all these things down. And just like they write down blocking, they can say, okay, for this moment, we've got the intensity at a scale of 5, duration of 3, actor A initiates, actor B pulls away, just as a reminder. And you can do that at every intimacy call, you can do that before every show. And that's also a moment where somebody can say, actually, it's been feeling more like 6. Can we call Torie, or can we email Torie and talk to her about that? They can do whatever they need to do in that moment. They can email me. Sometimes I can come in, depending on, how busy I am, which great. And the choreography should be ideally the same from start to finish until the production closes. I don't care how you feel. I don't care what the audience is doing. I don't care if you're getting more into your role. It does not matter. You do not make changes without consulting the director and the intimacy director. Not saying that you can't. You just can't do it arbitrarily. Yeah. I like to use what are called anchoring moments in choreography. And this is just the checkpoints of what I use for any intimate scene, right? First thing, who initiates it? You never just say, all right, and one of you go, right? You're gonna say, who do you think would initiate this kiss? Well, I think it would be actor A because she's just declared that her feelings have changed. So she would initiate the kiss, right? That makes sense contextually. So now it is her responsibility, right? That means this actor is responsible for the, what I call the eye lock. If you don't catch those eyes, you don't do it. That's the green light, right? Sometimes if you're coming, because I know this question is coming, if it's something that happens from behind, we need an exhale, we need a shoulder tap. There has to be a sign that says, I'm ready. There's gotta be a green light, whether they can see it or not. So that's a point, and that's the next thing called the point of connection. So who initiates point of connection? Ideally, the point of connection is just eyes, but sometimes, again, if they're coming from peripheral or behind, we make that something different. But there should always be a point of connection. You always want to talk about duration. Don't ever make them guess how long an intimate moment should last. And I mean, you decide if those are Mississippi seconds, if it's 1 and, right? 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 1 and 2 and and make sure everybody knows what kinds of seconds they are, so that there is no confusion, right? If it's 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, that's recorded as 2.5. Or you can write 2M, whatever the stage manager wants to do. So that I didn't know if it was a 2 or if it was hard line on that. You don't want it to be like, and then you slowly pull away. Set that duration. You want to decide who leads the moment. If it's an extended period, it may not always be the person who initiates that leads it. You may have something so specific that someone starts it and becomes hesitant and the other person affirms, and this is probably more for film, but sometimes this happens on stage too. So you want to decide who leads it. Has anybody ever seen Talladega Nights, Will Ferrell, where he just doesn't know what to do with his hands? Please tell your actor where to put their hands. They're gonna ask. I don't know what to do with my hands. Place it. Just see where it goes naturally and say that's where they should always be. If they kind of don't know, try. If there's no boundary on the hip, try there. If there's no boundary behind the neck, try there. Especially if it's a long period of intimacy and it moves. Set that like you would dance choreo. Do not let them freely go rubbing and touching. You set it. You set it. Start at the nape of the neck down to the small of the back. What you set that. Absolutely. You want to set a scale of intensity. Again, if you're using like a 1 to 10, I would even say. 1 is, honey, I'm home. 10 is hot and heavy. We probably could infer what comes next, right? And there's lots of middle ground there that you can have conversations about. Lots. And the actors may be a little skittish about setting those numbers. Throw one out there for them. How about we start at a 6? If they recoil, you can say 5. Start at a 5. Because a lot of times this one's 5 is different than this one's 5. So you really have to take your time and set that. You say 5, they do a 7. You say out loud, okay, great. That looks more like a 7 to me. Does that feel like a 7 to you? Does that make sense if we record a 7 that that's what it becomes? You have to say that so that they know when it becomes less than that or more than that during the course of the practice, right? So that's why I use numbers. Every intimacy director does not use numbers, I swear about them. And then finally, you want to set who breaks the moment. Who breaks the contact? Who pulls away? Might not be the same person who initiated it, it might be. It could be an outside force. It could be somebody coming in and saying, that's my wife! Then that person breaks the contact, right? But in that moment, and a lot of this stuff I'm describing is lip to lip, but it can also be lip to cheek, neck nuzzles, you can apply a lot of the same choreography to that. And finally, closure, we talked a little bit about that. Grounding exercises, stepping out. If it's intense, just offer it. They may not take it, they may be fine. You know, we're not new to this, we're true to this. You can just walk out the door and be like, where are we getting drinks? And if that's you, that's great. But if you're dealing with younger actors especially, offer up something to let them clock out. They do not have to walk around in this weird headspace of their character. Really quickly, and then I promise I'm done, I want to talk a little bit about what boundaries are. I've been using the word boundaries quite a bit. I want to talk to you a little bit about what those are. And some of these we've talked about already. Boundaries can be physical, professional, personal, or cultural. Okay? Physical boundary, hey, let's lay out this shoulder. I have a softball injury. Or my shoulder is a boundary. Please don't touch it. Because guess what? You don't have to give a reason ever. You don't have to justify your boundaries for anybody. You can be like, just don't touch my nose. They can wonder for the rest of their life. Doesn't matter. It is a mystery that will never be solved. A professional boundary could be, please don't talk to me on my 10-minute break. Please don't ask me about character work outside of the rehearsal room without the director present. Right? A personal boundary could be, I really don't like when people come up from behind. Like, please don't approach me from behind in a scene, right? A cultural boundary could be, I'm just gonna give one of my own, please don't touch my hair. No matter what state it's in, because it be in a lot of states. I like to change it like the weather. Today it's this, tomorrow it'll be an Afro, who knows? No touching. And that's my personal cultural boundary, right? There may be another African-American woman that's like, do you feel this? This is Brazilian, right? Can we just, we set these at the beginning, right? As we begin the process, we can say, and instead of saying, what are your boundaries? One thing I like to do is what's called a body scan, where you literally kind of go over your whole body to remind yourself what you don't mind sharing, right? So sometimes, and we use words like fences and gates. Gates open and close. Fences are always, right? Fences are off limits no matter what. Gates can be placed on parts of the body that allow relaxed boundaries. I'm gonna give you an example, right? So I might go through a body scan and I'll say fence. Especially if I'm doing like a husband and wife or a relationship, I'll say fence. That means absolutely under no circumstances can anybody ever touch me here. I might go down the arm and say gate. I don't like people to touch me on my elbow, but I also know that if it's something that the story needs, I'm willing to do it. So it's not a hard boundary, it's just that we don't have to. It could be injury related, it could just be like, I feel like my elbows have a weird patch of eczema on, well, I don't know, right? It doesn't matter. It's just, it can be that. So we do whole body scans all the way down, and if it's free, you say nothing. At the end, good, right? And that's literally how the actors do it. They'll go, gate, and gates just mean, for that day, it's a no. It could mean, do you need more context? It could mean, can we check back in a week? You just gotta talk to your actors about why that is.
Can
I
those
like to use,
change? Oh, sorry.
yeah, sorry,
Can those change? Can a gate turn into a fence?
absolutely. Yep, everything can change. The whole body could be a fence tomorrow. Good luck on your C version, you better have it. Better have it.
So I feel like I'm hearing that this might be a good exercise to go through during a call.
Yes, and I'm talking about rehearsal.
Right.
But absolutely. What it would look like in a call, right? If you've set the boundaries for rehearsal and you've already choreographed the intimacy, what it would look like in a call would be, have any of your boundaries changed? Because the choreography is set on the boundaries.
Right.
So you don't have to do a whole body scan necessarily every night if the choreography has been set on the boundaries. Now, if the boundaries have changed, that's where you'll go to your B or your C.
But maybe encourage, I feel like I would wanna maybe encourage the actors to do that themselves as they're prepping to come to.
Absolutely, sure.
So that they know what to say.
Absolutely. Sometimes they feel more comfortable doing it in front of somebody, and sometimes they don't. But for time's sake, you don't feel like at that 15 minute to half hour, they gotta do a full body scan. You can say before they do the call, have any of your boundaries changed? And that would be the time, and that's also a good time, honestly, to determine if we're going to a different version, and then we can practice that version. So it's not like, oh, we did it 4 weeks ago, we don't remember how to do it, or whatever. One other thing, so I use the term fences and gates. Some people use like red light, yellow light. I don't like that, but to each his own. Do what you need, do what works. I also like to remind the people in my space to always use neutral, anatomical, and deloaded language. You don't want to say things like grab her boobs, right? You don't want to say things like, and then you go at it. You want to make the implicit explicit all the time. You need to use proper words and language because it deloads the room. it makes sure that nobody's snickering and giggling or not taking it seriously. So that's really important. Organic moments and impulses can still occur. I feel like I need to say that again, right? When boundaries are set, it's not that you can't, when I'm choreographing an intimate moment, let's say the hands, for example. If this actor has said, I don't have any boundaries above the waist, and we've set up an intensity and a duration, I will say, how do you both feel about allowing the hands to explore within the boundaries? So that you're not like, and then the hand goes up, and then up to the left, and then the top left of the shoulder, right? So we can't always do that because that doesn't feel organic. Now you do want to make sure it's consistent, right? You don't, just because of the buttocks weren't a boundary, you don't want after 4 days of rehearsing it, all of a sudden they're going down to the butt and grabbing the butt, right? That is a big change. So you don't want that. You still want consistency, but I don't want you to feel like impulses can't be honored and organic moments can't happen. They just need to happen within the boundaries. We like to call this the loose sack of sameness. Loose sack of sameness. As long as it's in the boundary realm, both actors will probably still feel comfortable with that. If you're doing a really, 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 really intense scene, like hard, everybody in the room feels the weight of it. You want to impose a self-care cue. This has been commonly known as a safe word, but we don't want to use any words of violence because it's not always about that, right? You want a word I like to use is popcorn. It's got to be a word that's not anywhere in the script so that when you hear it, you know it has nothing to do with it. And that is an automatic take 5. If someone's overwhelmed, if someone has felt triggered in any way, you want to give them a way out without having to explain it. If that balloon is one I like to use, sometimes it can't be a word that's in the script or we'll just think they're saying a line, right? So if somebody just says popcorn, director, intimacy director, everybody take 5, check in with the actor and ask them what they need. You can also, if you're really doing some hot and heavy stuff, you can do a nonverbal cue like a double clap or a snap, just something to keep an eye out on. If it's intense and this is a lot if you're working for young people, because I heard high school, things can be overwhelming for them and they don't always have the words to say, I need to take a moment. So you want to give them those tools if you can. I don't have time to get into the personal touch, but this is all in the guide that I will send you. And there are just some best practices here, just as reminders. You always want a consent-based room. Even if there is no intimacy in your script, we should all be practicing, rehearsing in consent-based spaces, right? You just don't want everybody to feel like they can go grabbing people, even if it's a comedy. And that's just saying it at the beginning. This is a consent-based room. If you're unsure, ask. If you've been working together for 20 years and you know each other, go for it. Take the risk. But if you don't, just say it. This is a consent-based room. When in doubt, just ask. If you want to grab somebody's hand and run across the stage, turn around your hand, great, boom. It's that simple, that quick. Any questions before I finally stop taking everybody's time? Yes.
I do. A lot of us in here go to shows and judge them. So with this intimacy, what that is trying to do is to whatever it takes to make the actors make that work, correct?
Correct.
So as a judge, when you're looking at a show and you see one person, it could be different every night because we don't always go on the same night. And you see one of them is out of the scene or whatever. And the third show, they're all together. So as a judge, you look at what you're seeing and for whatever happened, that wasn't working. And it wasn't working for you and it wasn't working for the audience. So I can see where this is very critical, that no matter what you set up, it has to sell the scene to the audience. Right?
The story comes first.
And so as a judge, it has to work for you as well as the audience.
Absolutely.
And I saw it happen.
I'm in full agreement because guess what? When it doesn't work, a ball was dropped. Either by the director, the intimacy director, or the actor. And that is a consequence of that.
I have a judging question.
Yeah.
So, as a judge, if I'm looking at a scene and I think that scene should be an A, but they're playing it as a C, what's the best way to maybe write about that to be appropriate? Like, oh, I didn't feel like this was as intense as it should be, or
Yeah, I wouldn't, I mean, because you're using intimacy director language, right? What I'm hearing is the story didn't ring true for you. Like it wasn't authentic. Because if it was, you wouldn't have had a question about it at all. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I wouldn't even use like, you should have kissed more. You know, I wouldn't even do that. I would just say this didn't feel like an authentic moment.
Yeah,
Good,
like,
okay.
you know, the actress just, I didn't believe that she was in love with this man.
Ball was dropped by somebody,
Got it.
either the actor, the director, or the IC. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
How do you recommend approaching, let's say it's a kissing, a situation where two actors are kissing, how do you approach the situation with the actors if one person has come to you on the side and said, okay, like something's happening, I'm not comfortable with it? Do you recommend the approach being both of them at the same time and you sort of just going back through the choreography again without pulling that person? Because I know you want them to trust you and you want to be a safe space, so you can't be like, listen, this is what's happening and this needs to stop. So you have to, do you recommend going back through the choreography or like nipping the problems?
It depends on the problem. But ultimately, I mean, if the problem is bigger than the choreography, that's a whole other case, right? But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's affecting the choreography because one of the people is no longer on board with what's been said. And that just means you gotta go back in and make the adjustments. And that doesn't have to be pointing the finger, that can be, this isn't working anymore. So we're gonna go back in and we're gonna adjust it. Excuse me. And you give the other actor an opportunity to make it comfortable for them. Excuse me. Oh, I got frog in there.
Well, we are so glad.
Yes, thank you for Thank you for your interest in this. This is important work, no matter what kind of theater you do. It just sets a tone for how we interact with each other in the world. And so I really appreciate you being open to the work, and thank you for having me here.
Thank